Big thanks to my sponsors, Ibis Cycles, Kitspo Cycling Apparel, Cali Protectives, Trust Performance, PNW Components, WTB, Industry 9, Shimano, and Jensen USA. Any purchases from the below links at Jensen USA will directly help support my channel as well. Hi guys, my name's Jeff Kendall-Weed. I'm a professional mountain biker and I make a lot of YouTube videos. This video is all about the Trust Shout Fork. But before we dive in, I want to give you a heads up that the main goal of my channel here is to grow the sport of mountain biking, and the way I think it makes sense to do that is through the Local Loam series. Now, that's where I travel to really cool spots that have a very successful local advocacy story, and then I meet the local advocates and I learn their story. I believe for the sport to grow, we have to work together and unite in order to increase our numbers, and advocacy groups are the easiest, best, strongest way for us to do that. Speaking of the Local Loam series, I just put out a limited edition t-shirt fundraiser to support the first advocacy group I worked with this year. About half these shirts are already sold out, so if you want to take a look at these, click this YouTube card up to my left. Today we're going to go over the Trust Shout. I want to give you a bit of a ride report. I've been on this thing for a couple months now, so we'll dive into it. Now, why does anyone make a fork like this with a linkage? The main reason why this fork has a linkage is so that the fork's offset can be reduced through its travel. This is accomplished by having a curved axle path that brings the front wheel back towards the bottom bracket of the bike. A traditional telescoping fork's axle would come straight up to the head tube, but the Shout's fork comes up and rearwards through its travel. A big part of why your bike handles the way it does is due to the mechanical trail. The mechanical trail is the difference between a line that goes straight down from the head tube all the way to the earth and then a plumb bob dropped through your front axle. As the mechanical trail gets bigger, the bike handles with more stability. As it gets shorter, the bike is more nimble. However, it's also more twitchy and nervous with that shorter trail. What the linkage forks do is they bring the front axle back, which reduces the offset, and because that's an inverse relationship, reduced offset increases the trail measurement. As your bike cycles through the travel, the head tube angle gets quite a bit steeper. So with a fork like the Message, the actual amount of trail the bike has stays very consistent, whereas with a telescoping fork, your trail has to get significantly reduced. I did some quick geometry based around this bike here, and with the stock 160 fork bottomed out all the way down at 0 mils of travel, the actual trail gets shrunk from around 114 to about 60. So you're seeing nearly a 50% reduction in stability in the front end of a bike like this when it's bottomed out. One thing I love doing in this videos is asking all of you about your own preferences and setups. So, what kind of travel do you want for the trails that you ride? Tell me the fork travel and the frame travel that you prefer on your home trail. You guys are probably well aware that I've already been riding the Shout on my Mojo HD5. Well, that's a 27.5 bike, and it's designed around a fairly short fork, a 170 travel 27.5 fork. This fork has more travel than that, and it fits a 29-inch wheel. So that means it's quite a bit taller than the fork that the HD5 was intended to be used with. So I did ride this fork in the Whistler Bike Park on my HD5, and I really liked that setup. So on A-line, I was able to hit all the jumps, no problem. Dirt Merchant, no big deal. I even started to air out that hip on Dirt Merchant for more height, which I'd never hit that hip before, but it's like 20 feet tall and you need a lot of confidence to try to air high on it. I actually felt so good with the Shout fork on my HD5 that I went over to Crabapple Hits and hit the whole set, including that 65-foot long Mega Booter on my HD5. That's the first time I've hit those jumps in probably a decade. So I really genuinely liked that Shout setup at Whistler Bike Park. When we went and rode some of the tighter trails in the valley with long climbs up and that weren't super fast down, I find myself battling the bike a little bit, and that's not a detriment to the Trust Shout fork. That fork works great, but my bike was simply designed for a smaller fork, and the bigger fork slackened out my seat tube angle and brought the handlebars up really high. Not a problem with the fork, it's just the bike I was riding was designed for a shorter setup. So I had an idea and threw the Shout onto my Ripmo AF.
Maybe that's the problem.
Once I put the Shout on the Ripmo AF, immediately there are 3 things about the bike that definitely improved. The actual seated position of the bike was better. The Ripmo AF has a 100 mil head tube. That's pretty normal, pretty standard. My HD5 actually has a 126 millimeter head tube, so the slightly taller handlebar height felt really good. The next thing I enjoyed about this setup was that the bottom bracket height felt just a tad higher. But what's really cool is that while it feels a tad higher at top out, you know, when you're not sagged in very far, on bigger hits, on bigger bottom outs, the truss fork isn't just going up towards the head tube, it's swinging back quite a bit too. So a lot of that travel isn't just dropping the front end. So I noticed way more pedal clearance at bottom out and at say 50% of the travel than with my shorter travel telescoping fork. I really like that, especially since I've been on platform pedals for the last couple months. Another spot where I really like having the shout on this bike is cornering. Yes, it's taller than the stock fork and that slackens the bike out quite a bit. Anytime I can get the side knobs to start to dig into the trail a bit, so here in the Sedona Desert, in St. George, Utah, a lot of the time in Bellingham too, whenever the dirt's soft enough that I can really dig in, the front is way more planted with the telescoping fork. Now what that means is that I can push into the front of the bike for a much harder pump than I could with a telescoping fork. It's less likely to shoot the fork off the trail. A big part of that is because simply more traction's available with a design like this than a telescoping fork can really offer. I'm really enjoying the shout on my Ripmo AF. In fact, on a long travel 29er, I think the shout is definitely a worthy consideration. If your bike came with a 160 to 180 travel fork and it's a 29er, definitely consider the shout. Let me know in the comments below, what length fork do you like to ride on your home trails? What kind of travel setup do you enjoy? For me, for around here in Sedona, I could definitely go both ways. Places like Whistler, I definitely prefer long travel setups. And back home in Bellingham, well, on all the public legal stuff, I definitely like the shorter travel bikes quite a bit. To me, I really like the way this fork feels, and I think it has more small bump sensitivity than what the Message does. That would make sense given the amount of sag you're gonna run is way more than on a shorter travel fork. But I do think the axle path also contributes to this. I enjoy this setup quite a bit when I'm really pushing my own limits. When I'm just casually tired riding down the trail, I don't really notice any component of my bike a whole lot. But when I'm really pushing it, I've got more front end stability and confidence with this setup than I did a few weeks ago with the regular telescoping fork. On that note, it's been fun hanging out, talking bikes, and I can't wait to hang out with all you guys next week. If you like this video, click that little red subscribe button below.